G2 has officially announced their re-entrance into the Call of Duty space by announcing their roster heading into the Black Ops 4 season. The new roster consists of Ricky, Blastful, Decimate, Facento, and Chino. Now, this isn't, like I said, whenever G2 made this announcement, they were very clear with pointing out that this is not their first time in Call of Duty. In fact, it's their third time, right? They had a team back in Infinite Warfare, and they also had a team back when they were known as Gamers 2 in Advanced Warfare as well, whenever they had a Spanish team with household, Spanish players known as guys like Tohor, Legend, Methods, etc. So this is not G2's first time. They want to see a successful roster, and they want to have success. And that is what they were heavily trying to covet when it came down to the offseason. I was hearing countlessly through a lot of organization owners saying that they're having to compete against G2. They're going to have to try to fight for their roster, that G2 is essentially trying to fight for every player that they possibly can find. And granted, you could argue the roster they have maybe isn't as good as a few others, but still, I'm just excited to see G2 back in Call of Duty Esports, to see them return, and I'm hoping that this third roster that they've now formed heading into BO4 can be one that lives up to their standards. Now, there are a few things that worry me with this new roster, though, and a lot of those are related to stats throughout World War II. And all the stats that I'm going to be talking about throughout this are from overall stats throughout World War II that are done by COD_stats. JP, the legend himself, put all these stats together, and so these are the things that I'm referencing to. So I went through and I wanted to test out Respawn KD, because with this new G2 team, it's very easy to argue not going to look the best when it comes down to respawns, and the stats definitely agreed with that. So I went through and I looked at the top 30 players in Respawn KD, and I went through all the organizations and said, well, how many players represent FaZe? How many players represent Optic, etc.? And so this is what I got. 100T has 3 players involved in the top 30. Luminosity has 2. Envy has 3. United have 2, Optic have 3, Reciprocity have 2, Red Reserve have 2, FaZe have 4, Splice have 3, and G2, they've got 1, and that was Chino. Along with Respawn KD, like I talked about, one player who's in the top 30, they end up as a team, right? As a team throughout all of World War II in Respawn KD, they had an average of a 0.98. And then you look at Search and Destroy, and you're saying, okay, well, this is where the team's going to start to perform better. Let's see how Search and Destroy works, right? Only a 1 average. Despite that, though, they do have 3 players who were in the top 30. So that's something to kind of keep a positive mindset forward if you are a fan of the new G2 team. But whenever I made these assumptions, I was saying, okay, well, 0.981 doesn't really look the greatest on paper. Let's compare them to other organizations. And so I even went throughout the studio today, and I was asking a few people, throw me out a random organization. And I want to test their Respawn and their Search and Destroy stats and compare them to the likes of G2. And so I went with Optic Gaming's Respawn. 3 players in the top 30, 1.06 average. FaZe's Respawn, they have 4 players in the top 30, and they have a 1.07 average when it comes down to that. And that's comparing a 1.06 and 1.07 to G2's now 0.98. Search and Destroy, like I said, it's got to be better, right? It's got to be much better, surely. 1.0 for G2. 100 Thieves, 4 players in the top 30. 4 players actually in the top 20, by the way. They have a 1.10 average throughout all of World War II. Splice's Search and Destroy took that name as well, just decided to throw it into a pot and see where I could get. 2 players in the top 30, 1.05 average. There is so much talent that has already been decided before G2 could even make a roster form, before all these 5 players decided to butt up against one another. There is so much talent that is already taken by so many organizations. It is very difficult to compare these new groups versus teams that are already solidified, especially against ones that I listed. But of course, stats don't tell the whole story. That was very much evident when it comes to boots in the ground when we talked about team caliber heading into World War II. This roster wasn't looked upon as a top-tier team, yet as we left that title, a lot of the players were looked upon into the conversation for top 5 positions, right? So I want to talk about a few things that I do like, though, for the new G2 team. One thing that I'm very fascinated about is Blastful and Decimate. Their roles on this team, I'll talk about the pressure in a little bit, but I do like the idea of having these 2 guys together. They've had a lot of success in the past. For the most part, it was their rookie season, both in World War II, trying to perform for their respective organizations. Along with them being kind of the SMG duo for this team, they're also going to be the Search and Destroy Mines. And then we also discuss and say, well, hey, they also played Ricky, Blastful, and Decimate, all under Reckless and Era throughout World War II as well, so they've got a lot of previous chemistry. Same thing with Decimate. He also teamed with Chino after this particular roster, went over to Team Envious to try to play with those guys, and he and Chino ended up seeing a top 6 finish at Champs. So a few of these guys, they have the chemistry, right? So I like the new SMG duo. I like the fresh faces, but I also like the chemistry that a lot of these players are going to bring toward this particular roster as well. Now, speaking of players, there was one that kind of popped off the page to me, and probably popped off the page for a lot of other people as well, saying, why is this guy on the team? Like, what did he really do throughout World War II? And to be honest with you, and I guarantee he'd probably say the exact same thing himself, didn't do a lot in World War II, to be honest. By far his worst year that he's ever had, and that particular player is Facento. Why would they go with Facento? Why would they go with a guy who was 58th in hardpoint time, a guy who was 64th in Respawn Slayer, a guy who was 78th in S&D kills per round, 63rd in hardpoint KD, 57th in CTF KD? Why would they go with Facento? And this is where I get it, right? I get what G2 is trying to do in this particular situation. The reason why Facento caps off this group, in my opinion, is because of his IGL role. The ability to lead the troops in different games, to me, is going to be important, because if we reference back and look at the old Envious team, the Envy team who placed top 6 at Champs, but prior to that didn't really see as much success as probably a lot of people had hoped for, right? The boys in blue weren't really living up to their title. And to me, the biggest reason for that was because you had guys like Chino and Classic who were meant to be the IGLs, meant to be the, kind of voices, the veterans behind the team. And that really wasn't the case. Those two guys didn't really lead too much in that particular category, or at least weren't known for doing that, for their respective teams. It probably took away from a lot of their stats as well. So to me, the decision to bring Facento on this roster makes sense because he's here for an IGL position. He's here to lead the troops, probably along with Ricky. So, transition in from that, Facento will be, in my eyes, the IGL for this team, if not going to be leading quite a bit of that in-game leadership role along with Ricky. Facento's going to be an unselfish player. He can run an AR, he can run an SMG, but he's not there to drop numbers. He's not being brought on this team, in my eyes, to put up big stats. Same thing with Ricky, right? Ricky can also run an assault rifle, probably going to be for this team. He's not known for dropping numbers. He kind of plays the karma role, right? Whenever a team needs him to perform, he's there to do that. He's done that throughout his entire career and probably will do that until he ends up ending it out, which I don't even know. He's kind of like the Vince Carter, essentially, I feel like, of the Call of Duty space. Just continues to go on, just doesn't really see any mileage. He also is going to be very valuable in Search and Destroy, which continues to be a big thing with the G2 lineup. We also have Chino, right? An AR probably for this new roster. Won 2 championships throughout World War II. Was the CWL NOLA MVP for Team Caliber. And saw quite a bit of success, right? Definitely rose to the occasion. We've known Chino to be a top-level prospect where he's, kind of led organizations to not necessarily championships, but has led organizations to top-level placements. He's kind of carried rosters throughout different pro leagues in the past, especially Black Ops 3 was a big one for a lot of people. But that's not even the biggest spotlight. My spotlight isn't on Facento. It's not on Ricky. It's not even hardly on Chino. What my big spotlight is on, the 2 players who I am looking at primarily for this new roster, are Decimate and Blastful, as they are going to have to try and compete against other top-level SMG duos, right? They're going to have to face off against Envy's Apathy and Hook. They're going to have to face off against OG's Scump and TJ Halley, E-United's Abizi and Prestini, Splice's Temp and Jerd. They're going to have to face off against those particular duos night in and night out and have to have better stats than them if they want to see success, because you can't really rely on your assault rifles in this roster. We've known that for a very long time. And if you look at their prior roles, they're not going to change. Ricky's role isn't automatically going to totally change. Facento, probably not either. And Chino is pretty much going to be in the same spot, I'd imagine, as he was in World War II. So to me, what shift this team needs to make is going to be in the SMG category. And it's a lot of pressure to be put on these particular 2 players. This is their second year in the CWL. They were rookies last year in World War II. And now to perform on a large-scale organization, right? Decimate's already felt the pressure. Blastful has as well in certain situations. But how are they going to perform? And that's the thing, right? I think Decimate had a great year in World War II, a great rookie season. For Blastful, though, I looked up his stats, 0.92 in Respawn KD. That needs to turn around, right? He needs to be averaging pretty much along with Decimate. They need to be the SMG duo, in my eyes, for G2 to see success, right? Those stats can't fly now, right? Your rookie season, being promoted to a roster like G2 where you now have to perform at the highest stage, and now you're looked upon as one of the top 3 players probably on this roster, you have to perform. And if not, all of that's going to come down on you. And that's the biggest issue with this roster for me, is that granted, they are a good search and destroy roster. That's warranted, right? They're going to have a lot of great communication. They're going to have great chemistry. But when you compare them to the likes of 100T, of Optic Gaming, of Team Envious, Splice, whoever you want to throw in there, Luminosity Gaming, you want to try to tell me that this team is going to see a lot of success versus those rosters when they're probably only looking good at one particular game mode? That doesn't fly with me. I've never really been a big fan of the hardcore search and destroy teams, because I feel like a lot of the time when it comes to big tournaments, so when you start to lose that momentum, it's very difficult to try to rebound. And so that's why my biggest issue is with this team right now, is that can they rely solely on search and destroy and see success? Can G2, after their third roster now, finally have success with one of their rosters? That remains to be seen.